everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna revisit my yarn lasagna dyeing technique where I layer yarn and dye powder, smush it through, then add more yarn and dye powder and smush that through to dye multiple skeins of yarn in one pan. And I found this to be a very handy way to dye more skeins all in one pan and still get a soft variegated colorway. But you all wanted to know what would happen if I try this technique but use a different color with every round. So we're gonna start and do 3 layers. But our first layer, we're gonna use some pinks. Our second layer, we're gonna use some blues. And our third layer, we're gonna use some yellows. Will it all blend together? I don't know. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Janz. Dawn, thank you so much for giving me the nudge to try this out and see what happens. I really appreciate all of your support. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Dawn, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Today, we are gonna dye 600 grams of Knit Picks Swish worsted yarn. This yarn is 100% superwash merino, is extremely similar to Swish DK. It's just the worsted weight version of a yarn base I use all the time. And the plan, again, is we're gonna dye 2 skeins at a time, but just changing the color of the powder that I add on. The thing I don't know is because as I add the dye on and sort of squish it through the layer, some of the dye that goes on top is going to go to layers down below, and some of the color beneath the yarn, since there's no acid, might also come back up and come through. So it's possible we could get a blend of all 3 colors, but I don't really think that's what's going to happen. I think that there will ultimately be some separation of colors and that we'll have differences between the yarn that's on the top and the yarn that was on the bottom. And that's because my tap water is slightly acidic, so even without adding additional acid into my project, there are colors that I will see strike right away. Now, there's some colors that I can add the powder on and I can work it through and spread it and get even color coverage. Those are colors I've picked for lasagnas of the past. I mean, the other 2 times I've done this. And so I'm torn between going for primary colors and starting with and using, say, the primaries deep magenta, Caribbean blue, and brilliant yellow, because I know that when I mix those together, the midpoints, assuming that they're, well, 2 to 1 to 1 ratios in the center of that triangle, are beautiful colors. Very, very beautiful. So if everything blended together, it would be fine. And with these 3 colors, I've also layered them one at a time as tonals on top of each other, also for super stunning results. So we know we could end up with something really, really beautiful. I just don't quite know how it'll go. I do know if I use those colors, the blue, that Caribbean blue, will likely spread throughout everything. That color takes more time to strike, but honestly, I don't know. I don't know how this will go. And so I'm debating with myself whether I want to do those primaries that I mentioned. So then the plus of doing the primaries is that any blending that we get between the layers, we'll know because we've experienced these colors on their own, so we know what to expect there. But if I pick like other blues, pinks, and yellows, then maybe I won't know what, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to do. And so I'm sitting here debating, talking to myself, trying to decide. But I think I'm gonna go pre-soak the yarn and then we'll decide a little bit later. Yeah, I'm entertaining the possibility of pulling multiple colors for each layer, because typically what I've done in the past is maybe I'd even start at the bottom of the pan with a little bit of one color, and so then I'd layer the color on the first layer, maybe flip the yarn to add more dye. And then I put a little bit more dye powder on top of the first layer right before adding the second layer of yarn. So there's yarn beneath it and I don't have to try to flip the yarn in the middle. But yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe this time, and since it's worsted weight yarn, it's easy to get good coverage because there's only so many strands, and so it's less possible for some of the strands to get trapped underneath. And so I should be able to get good coverage, I think. We'll just have to see how this comes out. Right now I'm adding zip ties onto the yarn. I figured I may as well do something productive if I'm gonna be sitting here rambling, thinking, hemming and hawing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited though. I mean, it might be worth using a couple of pinks, maybe like 2 pinks, 2 blues, and 2 yellows, just so that way if things do all blend together, we maybe have some like interest in there. Yeah, I think this will be really, really fun. I mean, I know it'll be fun, but I'm now going to go and pre-soak all this yarn overnight so it'll be nice and saturated for our project tomorrow. But there's no acid in the pre-soak. That's important because otherwise the colors won't spread much. For our lasagna today, I've decided to go with the following palette, where we have our primary colors down here, Dharma's Brilliant Yellow, Caribbean Blue, and Deep Magenta acid dyes, and then a more, I guess, muted, it may not be the right word because these colors have brightness to them, but a different color value, I suppose, with Berry Crush, Sapphire Blue, and Honey Mustard. Now, I could have tried to pick a red here to stick with the primary theme, but Brilliant Yellow is the only real primary yellow besides, I mean, I guess Sunflower is, but that's not that different, and Fluorescent Lemon isn't quite the color that I wanted for this, so this should give some nice variation, I hope, for each layer. Now, as we get started and set up with our first lasagna layer here, I am adding 200 grams of our Swish worsted to the bottom of our pan, and I actually added a 7th skein to the pre-soak to have as a yarn mop off camera. This also has no acid in it, so that way if I wipe my gloves on here and then touch this yarn again, I'm not introducing acid into our pan, into our layer. And now I'm just gonna add, again, some plain tap water. I'm gonna want enough water in here so that way I can try to squish the colors, both dissolving the dyes and in general just working it through the yarn. And so I've added maybe, after I add a little more, maybe about 5 cups total, but I want enough to like cover the yarn and give it a good squish. We'll add more and more liquid as needed throughout this whole process. But again, we're gonna wait till the end to add acid. So now I'm gonna go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we're gonna build our lasagna. Sorry, every time I say lasagna, I like giggle internally, and I love calling this a yarn lasagna. I love it. Chat is the best. Okay, so of all of our colors, I know that the yellows are different, the blues are different, but I did not double check that the pinks are different. So we're gonna do a brief little test. This is Berry Crush, which I think, oh, that's so pretty. Oh my goodness, but see how much I'm able to spread it already, just because there's no acid in here. If we had acid on this yarn, the color would not spread this much. Oh, not at all. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. Oh, and I really did not add very much of it yet. Don't worry, I'm planning on adding more, but this is just in case, and I did dry off my hands, just in case we need to edit the color of it. This is Deep Magenta. And I'm wondering how similar these might feel. Okay, they are different. They are probably some of the closest and the most subtle of potentially all of our colors, but everything might just blend together. So I think we'll be okay. But again, I have not added very much dye yet at all. And we got really, really broad coverage of our colors. In fact, let's look. Okay, the color's not going all the way to the other side, but we're getting really, really good color penetration. We're just gonna have to work the colors through. And so that's what I'm gonna carry on and do. As I added on more pink dye, I did allow myself to lift a portion of the yarn and check beneath to see how the coverage was going. And I even at some points added some dye a little bit beneath to help work that color through. With this first layer, we're really worried about coverage. And as I squish my hands down, there's still a lot of pink in there, but I'm only planning on adding blue on top of the white areas of the yarn we see the next layer, even though some may fall on top of this pink. But we'll just have to see how that goes. All right, I'm ready with our second layer. And unlike the very first, or the other lasagnas that I've done, and I'm gonna place this halfway in. Unlike those other lasagnas, I am not adding dye to the bottom first, but you'll notice right away that we're absolutely soaking up some pink color. Which is very, very cool. I am not squishing yet. I'm doing my best to not squish, but we're gonna layer, and my new way of doing this is to get the center at the color transition and then to lay the rest down. Now, if we had acid in our yarn at all, then we would, I guess, be able to get less transfer between the layers than what we are. But now, I'm gonna put my mask back on, and before squishing, because I know if I squish now, we'll see a lot of pink. Should I add water first? I guess I should add a little bit of water first. This is gonna bring the total volume of water up to 8 cups, and I'll get more on hand, but yeah, we'll start doing the blue before we squish. And so I guess another experiment we could do at some point would be to see if we do something like this, you know, and we do a variegated color at the bottom, can we just layer colors on top, and will they get more and more pastel? This is the Sapphire blue I am starting with, and hopefully I'm not using too much. But now we'll start squishing this. Is it going to disappear on me at first? Ooh, I see some purples, but I will say I am predominantly seeing blue right here. And I'm so curious what's happening down below, and I'm going to try to not look right now, because I am floored that what I'm seeing is this blue and not very much pink. I mean, when I squish, I guess maybe it's a little bit purpley, but I am very, very surprised. Because you see those pinks coming through, but I guess what we don't know ultimately is like where it stops. I mean, I guess we'll probably have to peek, because I'm going to need to know if I need to squish things more to try to avoid whites. But this is cool. Okay, Caribbean blue, probably a little much. Try to go lightly there in the middle. Hopefully this is not too much Caribbean blue. This is a color that spreads a lot. So I'm tapping lightly at first, just to initially dissolve and spread out that dye. But we're gonna want it to go down more than just like a few layers. So we're gonna have to squish more and more. Oh, wouldn't that be interesting if the colors move down more than they move up? That would be really, really cool. Really cool, because I am not seeing a ton of pink. Now, my tap water, and oof, I do see some pink transfer on there. I'm not seeing a lot of white, and that's mostly what I'm looking for. And I feel like I can move on to the Sapphire without drying my hands in the middle, but oh, this is so cool. Okay, we're getting really good color coverage. I think I want more Sapphire blue on that half. But so far, this is turning out, I think, more different than maybe I expected. I mean, I never expected everything to blend completely, but it really does depend on the pigments we're using, because some pigments that I use, I notice even with no acid, they don't spread very far. And then others spread incredibly far with no acid, like these that I've picked so far. So yeah, there are definitely colors where you won't be able to squish the colors through in this kind of way. But oh my gosh! The yarn mop does not have very much action on it. But of course, as we go into the yellow section, I mean, I have to expect that some of these blues are going to come up and come through there, right? Like, that would make so much sense to see that. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know what to expect. But I'm going to go get the other yarn because I think this is pretty good. Do we need a peek? Oh, that looks cool. Oh, I peeked a little bit. I don't know if you could see, but there's like pinks and, oh, this is going to be awesome. Possibly because of the way the yarn is folded. Because you can see like the skein of yarn is longer than the pan. And so therefore there's little like folds in it, right? Oh, interesting. I lay that down and we see pinks coming up right away. I mean, here we see blues, but that's still so interesting. I don't think I said this, it did look like Berry Crush may have some blue pigments in it. Some blue pigments that I don't think struck very fast. Or I think did strike fast. So there is that. But my hypothesis right now is that our top layer is going to feel very, very green. But let's add more water. Oh, that's a lot of water. That's another probably 5 cups. So I think we're at, goodness, 8 plus 5, 13, approximately 13 cups of water. And yeah, let's do this. I'm going to start with the honey mustard, which is a yellow. It's just a more golden yellow. And I'm adding a fair amount. Hopefully, I don't regret that. But I'm very lightly tapping it in at first so you can see it is, I mean, it's certainly blending some with the blue below already, even with just this light tap before we go in for a healthy squish. Yeah, and it's turning a lot more mustardy. But this is so odd. When I squish, it's looking brownish. I am not I mean, maybe there's a little bit of green in there. I'm not feeling a lot of green. I mean, I don't feel the honey mustard color, really. So I suppose that is also true. But let's bring in our brilliant yellow. I think I've ordered more of this color. I'm getting low on this jar. These jars I order from Dharma are 2 ounces. And 2 ounces of dye is like, I forget how many grams, 50 something? It lasts a while. It lasts a while. Okay, and I'm going to bring this onto our honey mustard. It's
it's looking like more and more orange to me. Okay, let's start tapping this one in. This one is gonna go green. Ooh, and what a pretty green. This one is looking very, very green right away. And in fact, I mean, I have no idea what's happening beneath the surface, but I'm not feeling a lot of that yellow anymore. And that's because of that blue. That blue spreads. And I'm curious, I mean, so some yellows are definitely going down for sure. This is like way more interesting than I thought that it could possibly be. With like the way that these colors are layering together. This is so cool, Dawn. Oh my gosh. I was so nervous at the first request to do this because I thought that, not that I thought everything would blend together and become like a complete tonal, but I mean, I didn't know what would happen. So we put honey mustard on here, but I'm now layering some of this brilliant yellow on top just to brighten it a little bit. Just gonna make it more orange. I have no idea what it's gonna do. And I have no idea what's happening on the layers below either. But I do feel like things are a little bit brighter. I mean, oh my gosh, that's so wild. That's so wild. So, yeah, I'm now amazed that like this whole lasagna thing has worked as well as it did. Man, because, oh my gosh, I'm amazed. I'm amazed and happy and so curious to see what we're going to end up with. Oh my goodness. Okay. I am going to quickly wipe this down. I could have done this with the yarn mop. But with the exception of a few yellow chunks, we're done with the dye powder. So I am going to go ahead and put my mask aside, and we're going to add acid.
The not knowing what's happening all the way at the bottom is super, super hard. Let's do, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, a little over 5 tablespoons of white vinegar, but that is currently only on the surface. So we need to kind of work it through. Because don't forget, there has been no acid in here at all so far. So the only acid in here, oh my gosh, that honey mustard I think goes a bit slower because I'm seeing like the brownish green things there and more greens over here. Hopefully this will help things. So I think what I want to do is let things sit. Ooh, I might go ahead and there's not a ton of water in here. I think I'm gonna set this on the stove, but not turn on the heat yet. And I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit for 20 minutes before we turn on heat and add more water. But what I can say is I see right here, just off camera, a bit more of like a mossy green. And if I peek, I do see some pinks there still. So we aren't gonna, certainly don't have 6 skeins all of one color. There's differences, but this is so cool. Especially because these 6 skeins, if they're used together in one project, if there's asymmetry within any of the skeins, that's okay. Oh, this is cool. All right, onto the stove. I'll check back in shortly. And as for our yarn mop, I am going to hold tight currently, leave this be. I still haven't added acid to it, and wait until we have space maybe to steam set it, or maybe we'll immersion set it in the leftover dye bath. I don't know, but we'll set this aside until later. All right, we're here on the stove, and I'm gonna turn on the heat, and I think I want to add some more acid. I haven't checked to see where we are color-wise. 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that brings us up to 10. That's a reasonable amount of acid, and I have to remember that this yarn is superwash. So colors do strike a little bit faster here than they might to the non-superwash counterparts. But what we don't want is to scorch the yarn, so I am going to want to add more water. But, oh my goodness, even pressing now, oh, there might be, if I move to the side, ooh, I see some pinks come out. There are colors that have not absorbed that are currently trapped in various parts of this. That is pretty cool. Hopefully we've brought all the acid all the way through. A lot of our yellows have struck. Okay, we've now brought this up to 16 cups of water. Because we just don't want everything to be too compressed on the bottom. But I also don't want the color to be able to move around too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some foil so we can cover our pan. And then I'm going to reduce the heat. So it's on a lower heat. But we're starting to see a little bit of movement, which is good. But so I'm going to turn the heat down to medium. But covering it will help. Ooh, that's warm back there. Covering it will help trap the steam in so that way things don't dry out very much. So I will peek in occasionally, but we'll all come back in about 30 minutes. All right, it has been 30 minutes. Nice and steamy, always good to see. And let's see how we're doing. I mean, maybe I see a hint of pink in the water. I wasn't expecting to see color up there, but when I move it, yeah, we're seeing some pinks down there. And what about up here? Okay, that side's pretty clear. All right, I am actually gonna remove the yarn now. There might be some pinks left, but I mean, that is what it is. I'm gonna turn off the heat and let's go one skein at a time. So I'm gonna remove the green. Ooh, we've got green beneath it, but that green is much, right there is much more blue. Oh, and the reverse side of this, there's definitely blues in here as well. We'll take a really good look at all of the yarn once it's dry, but I guess it won't be, ooh, there's some pinks as it was laid. So if we look at the reverse, oh, look at those like pinks and purples in there. It's a little steamy, but that's so pretty. This has a lot of the gold and like brighter green, but then hints of those colors. And then down here, layer 2 looks so peacock. So peacock. There's elements of the blue still all the way through, but a lot of green. Ooh, a lot of pink too. So if I take this first one and flip it, you can see the greens, pink, and purple coming through. I'm surprised how little of the blue I see here. Certainly it is more blue than what we had on top, which definitely had the most amount of yellow in it. Oh, that is so gorgeous. You guys, this worked way, way better than I thought. Some of the yellow definitely came down and some blue came down onto here. But the bottom layer feels predominantly pink. And I mean, as a set, all of this is incredible. Things did not move that far. That is so, so cool. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Okay, now I am gonna grab the yarn mop. And it really hasn't had much acid in it yet. It's got a little bit of all the colors, but now it can also soak up that last little bit of pink. We didn't necessarily need the yarn mop. There wasn't that much leftover color, but I will turn the heat back on. And I'm gonna heat this for 30 minutes, remove it to cool, and we'll wash it off camera. But our main yarn is extraordinary. Dawn, thank you so much for wanting all 6 skeins and encouraging me to do this experiment, because I thought that it would be like, I thought that the results would be super similar to the episode of Dyepot Weekly where I had one skein with like pink powder, one with blue powder on it, and I dipped it into the same pot, where there was a bit of transfer between, but we have so much variation in here. Part of me wishes I had not use 6 colors, that I only used 3. So do you want to see me do this again, but stick with 1 blue, 1 pink, and 1 yellow? Oh man, that would be cool as well. But I love the variation that we have in here, and I'm really happy, honestly, because having like this gold color using that honey mustard meant that we actually feel some yellow in here. Otherwise, all of the yellow would have just felt green, which also would have been okay. This is amazing. It's time to wash our lasagna yarn, and I think I'm gonna try to wash it all together. Okay, maybe it was a little bit warmer than I thought. Usually I do try to let yarn cool off completely, but it's been a couple of hours, and so I think we'll be okay. And it is superwash as well. If it was non-superwash, I would want to be a little bit more careful. Oh my gosh, all these colors. And our first little dunk. The battery on my camera died, and that first dunk, I'm not seeing any bleeding, which is great. Hopefully my camera died very recently. It was just the battery running out. I just added some dish soap, and I'm a little nervous about some of those pinks bleeding, but we'll fill this up all the way with water. And now we can see. Get it in there. Oh my goodness, 6 skeins at once is heavy, but hey, we're not having any color bleeding. We've got a this is very parrot-like. This is very, ooh, the colors are so good. All right, I'm gonna finish rinsing out the soap. I'm gonna put the yarn through my spin dryer. We'll hang it up to dry and take a closer look at everything, because then we can have all the yarn together and just look at this magic we created. Before we go look at our lasagna yarn, let's first take a little glance at our yarn mop. There really wasn't much dye left over to use on this at all, but it is a very pastel, primary color kind of colorway. We have our 3 layers of the lasagna here. Our pink layer, our blue layer, and our yellow layer. And with the exception of the yellow layer, it's hard to figure out how I had laid these out. I mean, now looking at this, it seems like it has some more of the deeper blues to it, but I was trying to kind of reference where those deep yellows were for sure, so it's hard to tell. Especially because if you consider the fact that a bright blue with a tiny bit of magenta, when you combine those two together, you get a deeper blue. And so then that deeper blue mixes with colors like you had a deeper blue that we used on the other side. So all these colors are very related, and you really don't feel the differences between them very much. And it's hard to tell where they were placed versus how things blended with those first 2 layers. It's only a little bit easier here because we felt more of that golden yellow. And I'm blanking on what color that was, but we can still feel that color up here, whereas our primary color yellow mixed with the blue and gave us immediately this bright green. And that leads us to another conclusion that we have right away. There are elements of pink on our top layer and a few, not very many, but a few hints of yellow on the bottom. But I think the color that traveled the most is the blue, because we feel elements of that all the way around. And I don't think that it mattered that the blue was on the bottom for that to happen. I think that the blues, I mean, there wasn't a lot of acid. I think that the yellows strike pretty quickly because the yellows didn't travel through as far, but who knows? Who knows if we kept going and on top of the yellow use something else, what would have happened? And who knows also what would have happened if I stuck with just our 3 primary colors versus bringing a different pink and yellow and blue into the mix as well. No matter what, I think I'm gonna wanna try this again. I love that it seemed like the way that the yarn was scrunched up within the pan, and so some of each layer was a little bit on top versus a little bit on bottom, made things even more variegated, because I guess I expected things to blend a little bit more, but where things were placed within the pan did make a huge difference. Now, I do wonder if I could have scrunched things together a lot more and blended things completely. It could be worth doing an experiment sometime where I have 3 skeins side by side, one pink, one blue, one yellow, and then, again with no acid, sort of work the colors in so the dyes are all dissolved, but then bring all 3 together and really just squish them and see how much those colors spread versus really stay where they were originally placed. I think that could be a lot of fun to do. This set feels so magical, and I didn't think that we would end up with all one color. I thought that there would be differences between them, but I think my fear was that things would maybe, I don't know, that things would feel very asymmetric, like the colors weren't penetrating as much as we wanted, and yeah, I was just a little concerned that I wasn't going to be thrilled with the results. But clearly, we also need to try the experiment where we dye 1 skein on the bottom, don't add more dye, add more yarn on top, squish that through, and then add more yarn on top of that and squish it through, and see how much we can push that dye through. Because sometimes there are colors you can work those colors through really, really far, like greens especially, probably also Caribbean blue. But then there's other colors where that won't work because they might start binding even with no acid. Oh man, so much to think about. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to today's lab partner, Janz. Don, thank you so much for being my lab partner today and for encouraging me to try this experiment. I mean, this is a stunning fade set, and I think we might need to try something like this for the spring or summer mini skein mini series next year. But yeah, I mean, the one thing is that when dyeing mini skeins, the mini skeins that I buy are shorter in length than full skeins, so they don't need to be scrunched up in the same way. So things might also behave a little bit differently there. But we'll have to experiment and see. But anyway, Dawn, thank you for being my lab partner. Please make sure that all of you are subscribed and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. This is the biggest way you can help support the content. And then you can go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, which is filled with hand-dyed yarn featured in my videos. It's a great way to get some beautiful yarn to knit, crochet, weave, felt even with, and support the channel at the same time. Thank you so much for watching.